Fast forward 20 years, and this little girl, who's now a young woman, was a nurse, and she was working actually on the battlefield, and she was horrified by what she saw. She saw, men dying in their thousands, being blown apart. But what horrified her even more was the number of men that were dying in the field hospitals on the battlefield because it was so filthy. So over the next 2 years, she used to catalogue the dead, which is not, everyone's idea of a hobby, but it's what she did. And she catalogued how people died, whether they died in battle or whether they died from disease, or whether they died in hospital from disease. And she made a note of all these deaths. And after the war, she went to the government of the day and said, there's a problem here. And one of the problems with statistics is that often how they're presented is not particularly human. There's lots of figures and tables, and it's very difficult to read. But what she did for the first time in history, in fact, was to visually represent what was going on. And she created these sort of area graphs that showed great big chunks of colour. Blue was signifying people who died in hospital of disease. Red was people who died outside of hospital from disease, and people who died on the battlefield from their injuries. And the great big blue chunks of colour that signified people dying in hospital from disease were impossible to ignore. So Florence Nightingale's statistics and analysis and presentation of that data was the fact that reformed completely the hygiene and health of the whole of Europe. And she saved more lives doing that than she ever did during her nursing days.